Mr. Ferguson, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to each of you for being here. I've got the list of questions and topics is long and distinguished that I'd love to dive into. But let me start with just a couple of them, and then I want to move to a bigger picture. Number one, and Dr. Taylor, if you could possibly address this, I would appreciate it. What we've seen back home is that people are having a harder time paying for groceries. They're having a harder time paying for gas. The cost of building new homes is absolutely through the roof. Everything that American families need and touch is going through the roof. Okay. At what point does the consumer run out of gas? And now we're seeing consumers do buy now, pay later programs for gas and groceries. At what point does the consumer run out of gas in all of this?
So you're right to point to these raising prices. We've been talking about it for a lot. It's slightly less than it was before, but it's still very high and is yet to be applied to everybody. I think what you can do about it is make sure that you have some responsibility of the Fed. They have to make the adjustments. But the fiscal side is part of this. These charts that your colleague from Utah put up are quite striking. Why not try to deal with that? That'll make it easier to deal with these inflation issues that you're pointing to. It's very important. It's not just monetary. It's fiscal and monetary together.
Yeah, but I just wonder, I mean, it just feels like when my constituents are hitting this ceiling right now, and you continue to drive the demand side of the equation with the excess, government spending. And look, my colleague from Pennsylvania, the ranking member, said we're just trying to get to balance by cutting. I would say we wholeheartedly disagree with that. A big part of this is about putting forth pro-growth policies that drive the economy. And why should we do that? Would everybody on this panel agree, just by nodding your heads, that we need to ask the very simple question in every policy we make is, does it put us in a more competitive position against the Chinese Communist Party? Is that fair? Do you think that we should be transferring wealth, build here in America, sell it around the world, transfer wealth from around the world to the U.S. to bolster our economy, our standard of living, and our fellow Americans? Is that fair? So the question that I have, if you look at what we did, or what my colleagues did in the Inflation Reduction Act, we now have an estimate from Goldman Sachs advising investors that this is a good place to park their money because the estimates now are over $1 trillion of expenditures. Not 271, but almost 1.2 trillion. That's a huge number. And then yesterday, the administration announced, and I think they're still working on some of this, that we now have this quote-unquote free trade agreement. We're gonna expand the definition of a free trade agreement by going around Congress and allowing the Treasury Secretary to do it, where foreign governments get the benefit of the Made in America tax credit for EV cars and batteries. I mean, this just absolutely boggles my mind. Mr. Hodge, how does transferring taxpayer wealth to countries that we don't have a free trade agreement with bolster American competitiveness and our standard of living?
Well, with all due respect, Congressman, the Inflation Reduction Act violates all international standards of free trade. And so the Europeans have a good case to make that it is a protectionist measure. It violates WTO standards.
But specifically, don't you think that
it is an internationally illegal act? They have a right to sue us under the WTO.
Okay. But at the core of it, Made in America tax credits, and we can debate whether or not these things are good or bad for the economy.
They're bad.
But I don't disagree with you. But the fact that we have them, okay, can we at least make sure that they benefit Americans and not foreign governments?
You cannot do that, sir, under the WTO, and it is bad policy to begin with. I mean, the whole premise of the Inflation Reduction Act is bad policy. It's corporate welfare at its worst. And in fact, you mentioned the Goldman Sachs. Look on page 8 of the Goldman Sachs study, and it shows you how bad of a corporate welfare this is. It lists all the companies that they think are going to benefit from it.
And by the way, on that same point, by the time you fold in all of these tax credits, it's going to be a net benefit to the largest corporate citizens in America and around the world. And all of the rhetoric about corporations having to pay their fair share, it just gets flushed down the toilet because you're giving a tax break to the very people that you're demanding pay a higher level. With that, and my time has expired. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.